Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear friends. Hope you had a wonderful Christmas and a wonderful New Year. And I do think that all of your winter holidays must be continuing still. So, welcome back. And as we begin our session today, let us pray to the Almighty that inshallah this year would prove to be more beneficial and more blessed to all of us. Let us make our commitments for the year. Let us pass some resolutions, some targets that we should set for ourselves, and also think that all of us have been provided with this wonderful opportunity to enter into a new year and contribute what best we can through our talents, through our skills, through our abilities, because this is how we have been made, that we have to contribute and present whatever we can do to the world, so that we are, all of us are able to come together and see that this world is something that is basically a family. We are a family of humankind. We are a family, and we should feel for each other as a family. So today we are going to discuss a new topic, and you must have that topic already with you. The first thing that I'd like to discuss here with you is that as we profess faith, as we become Muslims, what we need to understand is that mere profession or mere professing the fact that we are Muslims, or mere telling or acknowledging the fact that we have professed faith is not enough. So, in other words, there are certain requirements of faith. So, there are certain requisites of faith. And if we study the Qur'an, we can clearly divide these requirements into two. One of them we can call the permanent requirements, and by permanent requirements we mean that they are required at all times. And then there are certain contingent requirements. Contingent requirements mean that they are not required all the time, but they are required as and when the need arises. So you can distinctly divide the requirements of faith into these two categories. So as far as these two categories are concerned, as I said, both have been derived from the Quran, and they also tell us that faith is something which must blossom. It's like a seed. When you sow the seed, and the stem sprouts, and we have branches, and we have flowers. So if we don't nurture the seed enough, it will not blossom. And as far as these requirements are concerned, both of these sets of requirements, they are basically the outward appearance of faith, and they are like the flowers and the petals and the stems of the seed. And they tell us, and of course they also communicate this fact to the Almighty, that we have not merely professed faith by our words, or in other words, we have not just sown the seed. What we have done is that we are trying to nurture the seed in a way that it grows into a beautiful, well-grown tree. So we're going to start off with studying the permanent requirements. So remember, we just said that there are two requirements, or two types of requirements. One is the permanent and the other is the contingent. So let us start off with the permanent requirements. So as far as the permanent requirements are concerned, they have been mentioned in the Quran, one of the surahs of the Quran, which I will just presently discuss. But they can be divided into two. One of them is righteous deeds, and the other is urging towards good and refraining from evil. So you see, the two things that need to be always there as a testimony to the fact that we have faith, as an evidence to the fact that we have faith, is that faith has to be accompanied by good deeds, by righteous deeds. And what does a righteous deed mean? Everything which is done for the cause of God and for the cause of the welfare of humanity, they constitute righteous deeds. For example, being good to other people, being sympathetic, being kind to them. So this constitutes one part. And then at the same time, dealing with them in a just way, dealing with them in a compassionate way. And then, of course, the other part is that you link yourself to God, and your deeds, of course, have that link with the Almighty as well. So when you pray to God, when you fast, when you do other worship rituals, they encompass another form of righteous deeds. So what you can say is that these righteous deeds, they have their relationship with God, and they have their relationship with your own fraternity. And everything good which comes out of you regarding God or regarding the people that He has created, or even the other life forms that He has created, they can be called righteous deeds. And then the second permanent requirement is also very important, and at times we tend to forget it, and that is urging other people to what is good and refraining from what is evil. So first of all, it's whenever you come in contact with people who are your friends, like your colleagues, your class fellows, your classmates, and you feel that something that is being done by them is not very appropriate. So as a friend, it is our responsibility to ask our friend, well, there's something wrong that you're doing. Of course, this has to be done in a very, very wise way. It should not be in a blunt way. It has to be in a very planned way. But you have to take it as a responsibility. Don't just overlook it. If someone is doing, and this relates especially to people who are in your surroundings. They could be your siblings, they could be your parents, they could be your children, they could be your near relatives, all those people with whom you can freely talk and communicate. So for such people, if you see that there is something that they should not be doing, then we should not just stay silent. We should not just stop and think that, well, that's not my business. No, it is our business, because you see, what we are doing is we are trying to make that person a better person. We are trying to advise him. Remember, we are not going to force any person. We must not force any person, and that's not our job. But the best thing that we can do is to advise that person, to suggest that, well, this is righteousness, this is what the good thing is, this is what evil thing is. But as I said, you must have a skill for that. It's a very technical thing. It's not easy to ask others to stop doing what wrong things are and to start doing what good things are, because this, you see, people will only listen to you if you yourself are in such a position that you are doing the same thing what you are urging other people to do. And at the same time, also remember, as I said, that don't be repetitive. It has to be in a very light way, in a very congenial way, in a very friendly way, in which the other person realizes that the person that he or she is talking to is a well-wisher, is someone who really means good. And of course, if you have that sincerity, your tone should be very gentle, your approach towards that issue should be very compassionate. You should not condemn people, you should not abuse them if they're doing something wrong. I always try to bring this up when we are studying such a topic, that the Prophet Jesus, once when he was with people who were very bad, he was sitting with people who were, you can say that he was sitting in bad company, people who were evildoers. And some of the other people passed by, and he said that, well, Prophet of God, what are you doing with these evil people? What are you doing with these sinners? And you know what he said? He said that I have been sent to the sinners and not to the righteous, which in other words meant that if people are bad, we should not shun away from them. We should not draw away from them. We should not be, arrogant enough to think that we are too good and so we should not sit in their company. No, we should actually come close to such people, try to change them, try to reform them, sit with them. And this is actually our token of friendship. It's always good. You can be good to good people. The real test is that you have to be good to evil people, to bad people. And you have that concern that, well, if someone is doing a bad thing, I have to plan, I have to do something to get that person out of it. But as I said, it has to be very planned, very skillful, not repetitive, not imposing, and in a very gentle way. Now, whatever I have just said is now reflected in this in these Quranic verses. So this is, in fact, it's a whole surah of the Quran, which is the 103rd surah. It's called Surah Asr, and many of us would be knowing it by heart. And this is the surah actually which tells us that there are these the two permanent requirements of faith which I just discussed. So it says, wal asr innal insana lafi khusr illa allazina amanu wa amilus salihat wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. So the translation would be, the time bears witness that these people shall definitely be in a state of loss, yes, except those who accepted faith and did righteous deeds and urged one another to the truth and urged one another to remain steadfast on it. So you see, those who accepted faith, if you just read that part, and then this verse did not stop here. It does not say that people who are in loss are the ones, or the people who will come out of this loss are the ones who have faith. No, it does not stop here. It says all those will not be losers in the end, who of course have faith, faith in God, faith in the prophets, faith in the books, faith in the hereafter. That is a given. But then they supplement this faith by righteous deeds and by urging other people to do good and by urging other people to remain steadfast. Because you see, what will happen is when you will try to do good things, you will be tried and tested with difficult times. And it is here that you have to be very steadfast, you have to be very patient, because when you do right things, it's not always the case that life would be easy for you. In fact, the more good that you'd like to become, the more you might be tested. So the second thing which is mentioned here is that not only should we try to urge other people to good, we should also urge other people that when they adopt the truth, and once they do that, they have to remain steadfast on it, because it's not easy always to remain steadfast on the truth. Okay, so these were the permanent requirements of faith. So the first was to do righteous deeds, and the second was to urge other people also to do these righteous deeds, and to urge them and to tell them that if you would do these righteous deeds and you find yourself being tested, then you have to be patient, you have to be steadfast, and must not lose hope, and still continue in the wake of all difficulties and adversities that you may encounter. Now let's move on to the next part, which is of course the other requirements of faith, the other category. Remember, the first category was permanent. What does that mean? That you have to do it all the time. So there is not a particular time that you can just stop doing it. So the permanent requirements are something that are required all the time. So doing righteous deeds is something has to be done all the time. Of course, as far as the second one is concerned, you have to choose the right moment to urge other people to do good, but it is something that has to be in your life. It has to be a part of your life. Whenever you are doing something in life, you just cannot subtract this particular requirement. The second is contingent requirements, and these requirements, of course, again are something very special, and they have been mentioned in the Qur'an separately, and each of them has its own importance. So the first thing is migration for the cause of religion. I'll explain this one by one. These are just the titles of these requirements, and each of them is based on a Quranic verse. So the first would be migration for the cause of religion. In Arabic it is called hijrah. Hijrah means to migrate. And then would be helping the cause of religion. So again, I'll explain that in a moment. And the third is adhering to justice, which is qiyam bil qist. Helping the cause of religion in Arabic is called nusra. Nusra means to help in technical terms. And adhering to justice means qiyam bil qist, which means that you have to adhere to justice. And this is something, as you can clearly see, that all these three requirements, they don't arise, I mean, they're not there for all times. They arise as and when the time comes. You're not always migrating, you're not always helping religion. It is only when there are certain issues which have arisen that you need to express these things. And same is the case with adhering to justice. Okay, let's now discuss them one by one. And as I said, that all of them are based on the Quran. So the first one is that if you are pushed in a place, in a country, that you are not able to follow your religion, and you are persecuted for that, and people condemn you for following your religion, and for example, as simple a thing, as basic a thing as praying to God, that people start persecuting you, they start doing bad things to you, and you are not able to offer your basic obligations in religion, then what the Quran says is that if the doors of other people, of other places are open, then you should migrate from such a place in which you are just not able to practice your religion. And today I doubt there may be such a place, although there are places in which persecution does take place. But as far as religious persecution is concerned, today we are in an era which this has minimized. But do remember that in the times of Prophet Muhammad, this was something which was very rampant. It went on. People were punished for following their religion. So as soon as a person would profess faith, he would say La ilaha illallah. What would happen is that he would be put to a lot of tests. Remember what happened to the muazzin, to the prayer caller Bilal. He would be made to lie down on burning rocks, and he would be persecuted. Ammar bin Yasir, one of the famous companions of the Prophet, the four limbs of the two upper arms and the two legs, they were tied to camels, and then the camels were made to run in opposite directions, and this just tore apart all those limbs. And this was just because of the fact that he had just accepted faith. So you see, this is another thing. And let me just read out the verses or this verse before you, so that you can have a basis of how we are told this particular requirement of faith. It says, "Inna allazina tawaffahumul malaikatu zalimi anfusihim qalu fima kuntum qalu kunna mustaz'afina fil ard qalu alam takun ardullahi wasi'atan fatuhajiru fiha fa ulaika ma'wahum jahannam wa sa'at masira." So the angels will ask people whose souls they take in circumstances such that these people had wronged their own souls. Of course, the fact that they were kept as people who would not be able to practice their religion, and they were not being able to follow. So when the angels will claim their lives, they will ask them that, in what circumstances were you in? And you know what they'll reply? They'll say, we were helpless and oppressed in the land. And then the angel will say, was not the earth of God spacious enough for you to migrate to another place? It is these people whose abode shall be hell, and what an evil abode. So you see, such is the stern nature of God, of God's commitment to this cause, is that He says that if you are persecuted for your religion, then you should try your best to change that area, so that wherever you go to a place where you are able to practice your religion. But as I said, over centuries, this is something that has been the case, that it has eased out. But what comes to my mind immediately when I read this verse, even today, remember there's a group of Chinese Muslims even today who are in China, the Uyghurs as they are called, and they are persecuted. They are oppressed for following their religion. And unfortunately, there's no one to accept them because they are in a large number. So perhaps this is one example that had these Uyghurs been given an opportunity to settle in some other part of the world, because you see, today you just cannot migrate to a place without the other place welcoming you. In the times of the revelation of this verse, there was no such thing as a passport or a visa. It was just the fact that you had the opportunity to vacate that place wherever you were being persecuted, and you could go to a new place. But today you can see that the Uyghurs, were being badly treated. I'm sure that many of you would be knowing them, and in case you don't, please do Google them after this session, and you'll find out how badly they are being treated in China. And there are very few people who are able to raise their voice. Remember that China, however developed it might be, it still is a communist country, and we just don't know a lot of things that they go on in the country, simply because they have an iron hand, they have complete control, and it is very difficult for the minorities to raise their voices. Very similar is the case with the Rohingya Muslims, and although their case of persecution is slightly different, what goes on with them is the fact that they are turned out from their land, from Burma, and the plea that is taken is slightly different. But in any case, you can clearly see that the Rohingya Muslims are there are another class of people who are treated badly. Also, what we can say is that for both of these two communities, the directive of the Quran would be that they should leave that place. But unfortunately, as I said, they can only leave that place if they have some other place to go, if there are some other countries welcoming them. And this therefore becomes a responsibility of some of the other countries, that they should try either to talk out these authorities to not persecute them, or if they are persistent in this persecution, then at least to provide them with a place where they can live as human beings, and they can live and freely practice whatever they think should be practiced. So this was the first contingent requirement, and as you can see, it's not a permanent requirement. It's not to be done all the time, because you're not all the time being persecuted, and hence it has been mentioned as a contingent requirement. It is a requirement that arises on as and when basis. Okay, so let's move on to the next requirement of religion, of faith in fact, and that would be, as I said, supporting the cause of religion. So let me just first read out the verses, or this verse. This is actually Surah number 61, verses 10 to 14, before you, and its translation, and then I'll try to discuss this with you. So it says, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu hal adullukum ala tijaratin tunjikum min azabin alim tu'minuna billahi wa rasulihi wa tujahiduna fi sabilillahi bi amwalikum wa anfusikum ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون يغفر لكم ذنوبكم ويدخلكم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار ومساكن طيبة في جنات عدن ذلك الفوز العظيم وأخرى تحبونها نصر من الله وفتح قريب وبشر المؤمنين يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا أنصار الله كما قال عيسى ابن مريم للحواريين من أنصاري إلى الله قال الحواريون نحن أنصار الله. Believers, shall I point out to you a deal that will save you from a woeful torment? Profess faith in God and His Messenger and fight for God's cause with your life and wealth. This would be better for you if you understand. In return, God will forgive your sins and admit you to gardens below which streams of water flow. He will lodge you in pleasant mansions in eternal gardens. This is great success. And listen, He will also bestow upon you what you desire. And what is that? Help from God and a victory which will soon come. And O Prophet, give these glad tidings to the faithful. Believers, be God's helpers in the way Jesus, son of Mary, said to His disciples, Who will be my helper in the cause of God? The disciples replied, We are God's helpers. So you see, this is a very comprehensive verse, or a set of verses which tell us that we are people who have been required to profess faith in God and His Messenger, and whenever the need comes, we should expend our life, our resources for the cause of God. And the verse says that this is a great success. But the real part that you need to perhaps cautiously study once again is the last part, and that is the believers of the times of the prophets, Prophet of God, Prophet Muhammad. They were given this example from the life of Jesus. And what was that example? The example was that when Jesus said that I need you people for the cause of God, to help the cause of God, to further religion in any way, will you be my helpers so that we are able to put across this to other people? And all His disciples said, yes. So we know that Jesus' 12 disciples, the famous 12 disciples, they said yes to Jesus, and they said that we will be your helper for the cause of God. Everything that you do for the cause of God, will be there with you. And the believers of the times of the Prophet Muhammad, the companions with the Sahaba, they are actually being given this example. And they are being told that just as the companions of Jesus said that we will be your helpers for the cause of God, O companions, you should keep in view this example of Jesus and His disciples, and you should also behave in a similar way. So, and this now constitutes the second contingent requirement of religion. This, in other words, means that all of us, wherever we are, we must see that wherever we can support religion, we should. For example, this support could be through the pen, that you write something for the cause of religion. It could be through your speech. But whatever it is, it should be something which relates to your own territory or your country, or maybe whatever ability that you have, so that what is being done is something which is for the cause of that particular time. For example, there could be situations when a couple of years ago, maybe a couple of decades ago, in fact, when these Central Asian states, or these you can say one of those Baltic states and states just below them like Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkmenistan, they received independence, and people who went there actually were the first ones to arrive, although people who were already living there were Muslims, but you will find that they had gone or drifted far away from religion. So therefore, in such cases, educating people or just giving them the Qur'an, or maybe building a mosque there so that they are once again able to bring themselves closer to religion would be constituting this support. So this support is something that has to be something which relates to your own times, to your own territory, to your own place, as well as to your own abilities. For example, you can give your skill for the support of religion. You can spend for the support of religion. You can give your time for the support of religion. But remember that this is something which is a requirement that all of us must weigh. That if we are living in a country in which any such thing is required, then it becomes a requirement of our faith. We just cannot sit back and relax and watch people or the cause of religion not being helped. No, remember, this is a requirement of our faith. The faith that we believe in, if that needs our help in any way, as I said, it could be any way. It could be educating people, it could be writing for the cause of religion, it could be giving time, it could be going to an Islamic center and doing some volunteer activities, all of them. But don't take it lightly. Don't think it's something optional. No, it's not optional. It's a contingent requirement of faith. And that contingent requirement, as I said, means that whatever needs to be done to support the cause of religion has to be done as an obligation, as a duty, not as something which is optional. Okay, now we move on to the last requirement, which is the third requirement of faith, and that is adhering to justice. This is the third contingent requirement, and this is also called Qiyam bil Qist in the language of the Quran. So the words are Ya ayyuhallazina amanu kunu qawwamina bil qist shuhada'a lillahi walau ala anfusikum awil walidaini wal aqrabin in yakun ghaniyan aw faqiran fallahu awla bihima fala tattabi'ul hawa an ta'dilu wa in talwu aw tu'ridu fa inna allaha kana bima ta'maluna khabira. So the translation is, believers adhere to justice by bearing witness to it for God. Now the next part is really very important, and it really shakes you. It says, even though it be against yourselves, your parents or your kinfolk. If someone is rich or poor, God only is more worthy for both. So do not be led by base desires by leaving God's guidance, lest as a result you swerve, you turn away from the truth. And if you distort what is true and just or evade it, you should remember that God is well aware of what you do. So you see, the first thing which the verse stresses is that adhere to justice. Always be just, even if that means that you have to bear witness against your own selves, against your parents, against your relatives. You have to speak the truth. You have to adhere to justice, even if adhering to justice would mean that it goes against your own interests. It goes against your own advantage. It goes against your own benefit, and not only your own, but of that of your parents, which is of course such a difficult thing. You remember that if you have to pass a verdict, and that verdict is something which is going to wrongly affect or badly affect your parents, one thinks twice or thrice, because you would always think that, well, how can I go against my parents? But here is what God says. It says that when something is just, when something is the truth, it has to be said, even if it goes against the view of yourselves, of your parents, of your relatives. No one is above saying the truth. Justice has to be administered. Justice has to be said at all costs. And I think this is something of a really, it's like an eye-opener that we adhere to justice. We try to stick to the truth. But whenever this sticking to the truth makes us lose some of our own benefits, maybe, or it is against our parents, we sort of at times just shy away. But the Quran says, no, even in such cases, you have to bear witness, because the status of the truth, the status of justice is far above relations. Justice has to be the queen of virtues. It has to be something which should be at the top. Whatever happens, you should not leave justice. Now there is another part of this adhering to justice, which I am now just going to tell you. This is another Quranic verse which is of very similar nature, but it has a different, I would say, sphere. So it says, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu kunu kawwamina lillahi shuhada'a bil qist wa la yajrimannakum shana'anu qawmin ala alla ta'dilu i'dilu wa aqrabu lit taqwa wattaqullaha innallaha khabirun bima ta'malun. Believers, be those who adhere to justice by bearing witness to it for God, and And your animosity for some people should not induce you to turn away from justice. Be just. This is nearer to piety, and have fear of God. Indeed, God is well aware of all your deeds. So you know what is being said here? It is being said, and we are being told, that you have to be just to your enemies as well. Even if the animosity of some people, even if the people who are at daggers drawn with us, who are our enemies, our animosity should not make us draw away from justice. We have to be just to our enemies as well. I think this is something of a huge import. It's something that is really difficult. So we have these two verses in the Quran regarding Qiyam bil Qist, or adhering to justice. One of them is regarding our individual lives, and the other one is regarding our collective lives. As far as our individual lives are concerned, we are being told that we have to bear witness to justice even if it goes against ourselves, our parents, and our relatives. And this verse tells us that if there is some enemy of yours, of course this refers to a collective enemy, and of course you can by analogy draw it to your individual enemies as well, that in such cases also it should not be the case that simply because a person is your enemy and now you are sitting in a place that you are administering justice, and that person is a person who is a petitioner and is presenting his petition, and you are in a position to decide matters, and you suddenly remember, well, this person is my enemy, and how can I be just to him, and I should really be very bad to him, and I should take my revenge. This is my time for taking revenge. The Quran stops us. It tells us no. If you are in a position to administer justice and you have an enemy standing right before you, it should not be the case that your previous enmity or animosity should drive you to do injustice. Even with your enemies, you must administer justice. And I think this is it's a huge thing. It's a beautiful thing that all of us need to understand. And it also sets the standard of justice so high. It's so on such a high pedestal that we can be proud of actually following it. So with these words, I come to an end to this presentation, and will now presently discuss some of the questions that I wanted you to answer in the wake of this discussion. Just to recap, today we have been discussing the requirements of faith, the Quranic requirements of faith, and we divided them into two categories. So one were the permanent requirements, the first category, and the other ones were the contingent. What does contingent mean? It means they arise whenever the situation is such that they need to be accepted and followed. The permanent requirements, which is the first category, relates to righteous deeds and to urge people to do those righteous deeds and to urge them to remain steadfast on them. And this we discussed as permanent requirements of faith, and this actually makes us connected with our fellow human beings. We are not just indifferent to what they do, we are very much concerned. So therefore, when we ask them to refrain from evil or to do good, this is our expression, our token of friendship towards them. So these were the two permanent requirements. As far as the two emergent or contingent requirements are concerned, remember the first one that we discussed was what? It was migration for the cause of God. If you are being persecuted in a place and you are not being allowed to follow your religion, then you must leave that place. Of course, if you have a place to go and you still don't go, then you would be answerable to God. But as I gave you this example of the Uyghur Muslims and Rohingyas, they are persecuted, and at the same time they don't have a place to go. So this particular threat, I would say, or warning would not be directly related to them. Had they been given a place to go and they would still not be going there, it would only be then that they would be held accountable for this misdemeanor. The second contingent requirement of faith that we discussed, as you can see, also let you know that as far as these Arabic verses are concerned, the first of them, as I said, is also based on the Quran. The second one is also based on the Quran, and as well as the third one. So these three requirements, as you can see, they clearly are the Quranic requirements. So second requirement is supporting the cause of religion, and as far as we are concerned, all of us, we have to see our surroundings, look upon our surroundings and evaluate where are we going and what best can we do to support the cause of religion. And the final contingent requirement is that we have to be adherents to justice, and this has to be both for our own selves and even against our enemies. So with this, I come to an end to this discussion, and we will now discuss some of the questions that we are, which of course are in the wake of the discussion that we have just done. Okay, so we just discussed faith, remember? And my first question to you would be that, is faith blind? What I mean is that, are we supposed to follow whatever being told, like for example, we are told that we must, we have to believe in the hereafter. This is one article of faith. Or we have to believe in the book of God. That's another article of faith. So when I say that, is faith blind, what I mean is that do we profess faith blindly without acknowledging or without any reasoning behind it? It's like being forced upon us, that God is telling us that you have to believe in the hereafter, and therefore we start believing in the hereafter. So the question is that, is it a blind faith, or is it a faith that we can actually reason out and we can understand? So anyone who can come up with an answer, you can raise your hand, please. Aiza, what do you say?
Sorry, I don't understand the question. So I didn't raise my hand.
Okay, the question is that we discussed about the requirements of faith today. That what are the requirements of faith that all of us have, the belief that we have. So we discussed some of the requirements. We said, well, there are certain permanent requirements, there are certain contingent requirements. But before that, faith itself, that is something that we believe. Is it a blind faith? Is it something blindly you follow? Is it something that you just have to do it because you are being told? For example, God tells you that believe in me, believe in that I am God. And you said, okay, I'm going to believe. Or we have a reasoning, or we have something that we can really understand through our intellect, that we are believing in God, not because it's a blind thing, not because we have no reasoning, but because of the fact that whatever belief that we have has some sound reasoning behind it. So Aiza, did you get this?
Yeah, I get it.
So what do you think?
No, we don't follow it blindly. Because as it's like in the Quran, you can like find a lot of the reasonings to what we do in everyday life, like praying, giving zakat,
right,
and etc. So I think that the Quran helps us in like the belief part.
Okay. So you think that the faith that we are required to profess in is not blind, and there are reasoning. So for example, if I just to take this discussion a little further, if I may ask that what exactly is the reasoning for which we should believe that there is going to be a hereafter? Why should we? I mean, the Quran tells us that the Qiyamah is going to come, there's a hereafter which is going to come. We have not seen the hereafter. Why should we? I mean, what is the basis of the fact that we should believe this is being told to us on the basis of a sound reason, and we are not being just forced upon to believe it? So as you said that when you pray or when you give zakat or you do other things, we are being told that why should we give zakat, why should we pray? So that is something that makes us comfortable. It makes us understand why. So similarly, if we are being told that you have to profess faith in the hereafter, I mean, is it just something which is being told to us and we just need to follow it, or is there a special reason? And the question I asked is that, for example, regarding the hereafter, do you think that there is a valid reason, some valid reason, or any valid reason in the Quran which tells us, or which makes us comfortable, well, this is the reason that the hereafter has to come? Okay, Fatima and Ariba, one of you is going to answer this.
Basically, the answer that I have is based on faith in God.
Okay.
So basically, faith is not blind, because when we have complete trust or confidence in someone or something, example Allah, we can see His powers and qualities. We can see the nature and the little beautiful things in earth that are created by Him, justifying our faith in Him.
Right. So that's a very good point that you have made, that when you believe in God, it's the fact that it's not that, in spite of the fact that we have not seen God, but that does not mean that He does not exist, because the existence of God is justified through a lot of things that we see in this world. The world that He has made around us, we ourselves, we are being created, and the fact that they are creatures always necessitates that if there are creatures, if there is a creation, then there has to be a creator. So therefore, one of the reasons that we believe in God is that we find an evidence of the existence of God. Yes, absolutely correct for that. Thank you. Was that Fatima or Ariba?
Ariba.
Okay, Ariba. Thank you very much, Ariba. Okay, do I see another hand? Okay, Sine? Yes, go ahead.
I feel like to function in general, you have to put your faith somewhere. So you would probably put your faith in what was most logical to you. And for the Day of Judgment example, there's, in my opinion, there's lack of a logical alternate answer. So it makes sense to me that I would be judged based on my actions in the moment, like in the world right now. Also, this seems logical to me because all the requirements asked by my faith seem very reasonable or logical. I know that we should adhere to justice because it's something that is a fact instilled in me. I feel like society, I've witnessed society function well when we adhere to justice. So because I've seen my faith pan out in a positive way, it reinforces my beliefs.
Absolutely.
So I don't think faith is blind.
That's wonderful, Sine. That's a very beautiful explanation that you have given, and you can add to it by actually discussing what we've just discussed in our session of today, that in spite of the fact that adherence to justice is something that all of us should do, but there are so many instances in life that that justice is not possible in this world. For example, if a person kills 100 people, even if that person is punished by, if his life is taken, you just cannot bring back those 100 people to life, or that cannot compensate the wrong that he had done. So, so it does seem that this world is an imperfect world, and there is this imperfection in this, and the need for perfect justice is there, but we seldom find perfect justice in this world, and therefore there has to be another world, because if God is just, He cannot just leave this world to go on with these injustices. He has to create a world once again in which that justice, which was not administered in the previous world, is compensated for. And this tells us, and this is one of the reasonings, that there is going to be a hereafter. Similarly, our own conscience. You see, our own conscience tells what right and wrong are. But unfortunately, the right and wrong that we find in the world does not match them, because we would find, or we would like, that the consequence of a good thing should be good and a bad thing should be bad. But this does seldom happen in the world. A lot of evil people, so to speak, they do bad things and they are still very successful in life. And it's the other way around. So again, we think that if God is just and He has placed a conscience in us which tells us what right and wrong are, but the results of right and wrong are not in proportion. And right has wrong results and wrong has right results. So again, this is a mismatch, and we would think that if God is a just person, if He is someone who really knows what right and wrong are, and He has placed this awareness of right and wrong in ourselves, then how could He just ignore that right should end up in a good reward and the wrong should end up in a bad reward? So these are some of the things, and yes, thank you very much for that, because the point that we are just discussing is that as far as the requirements of faith are concerned, they have been discussed, but faith itself is something that we have to understand, that it is not blind. We are told at every instance in religion that whatever we have to do is to be done because it has a logical explanation. And as Ariba, I think, just said, that and Sine, you also said that you find yourself such compelling evidence regarding other directives of Islam, that all of them have been logically explained, that you just cannot say that belief or faith is blind. Why I stress is the fact that generally in the contemporary world, when I was growing up and people of my age we were studying religion, our take was, or our teachers would generally tell us that, well, faith is something which you have to accept. You just cannot argue. You have to accept what has been told to you. And when I grew up and I read things, and I suddenly realized that this is an absolutely wrong approach. And the Qur'an, wherever it tells us or wherever it asks us to do something, whether it's a belief, whether it's a righteous deed, whether it's anything that you can pick up, it always has a rationale behind it, so that you are comfortable. You can justify that thing. It's not just that you're being forced to do that, and which tells us that the Almighty wants us to reason out and understand, and not to blindly follow. So thank you very much for that. Okay, let me just see the next question. The next question is that correcting our friends and siblings if they are doing something wrong. So this is one of the challenges that we face, and I was just discussing that when you like to correct someone, especially our friends and maybe your siblings or maybe people close to you, and you find it difficult because you see you don't either you think you should ignore them, or you think that the challenge is too big for you. So here I'd like all of you to participate in this small discussion, that given that you have a naughty sibling, maybe not a naughty sibling, maybe a sibling or a close friend who you think is not doing, he's doing something bad in life. So what do you think, how you should approach as a caring sister, as a caring brother, as a caring friend, that if one of your friends or one of your brothers or sisters has fallen into a bad habit, how do you think that you can convince that person in a gradual way, in a very persuasive way, that he or she should give up that bad habit? Okay, we find who is that? It's Seamer. Okay, Seamer, what is your suggestion?
You can explain to them what the benefits of not doing that habit are.
Right.
But you don't go straight forward and tell them that what they're doing is wrong and they shouldn't be doing it. Explain to them if they didn't do them, if they didn't have that habit, what
Right.
would be.
Okay. So what you're saying is that you approach your brother or sister or friend and you talk to them, you discuss something with them, and you let them know that if you're doing this, it's going to badly affect your life, or it's going to really put you in a spot that you would not be very proud of later in life. So what you're saying is that you reason out with them and you try your best. So one of the challenges perhaps is that you would feel that instead of just forcing or just giving a verdict that stop doing this or stop doing that, you go to that person in a very concerned manner and tell the person, the sister or the brother that you have or a friend, that well, this is the bad side of thing, and this is how it's going to affect you. Thank you for that. Okay, and now it's your turn, Sine.
After highlighting the consequences, I think that it's important to work with them to amend whatever that they're doing,
Right.
and collaboratively work together, because you want to show that you're a better person than they are.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the suggestion that you're giving is that you work with them as if you're going along with them. It's like a person is walking and you're walking with them, and then you slowly and gradually turn his or her direction, and without making that person realize that you're actually in a position or in a better position, you are a better human being or a better person, not making the other person realize that, and your purpose is that you walk along with that person and divert that person in a way that he or she slowly or imperceptibly, without even realizing at times that the path is being changed, but you are not imposing yourself. And that's a very good suggestion, because it does work psychologically, that when you meet people, especially your siblings and your friends that you meet every day almost, or maybe every second day, that you tend to be a little, I would say, imposing on them. You feel as if it's your right to correct them, especially if you are elder to them or older to them. But this should not be the case, and you should just gradually make that a challenge to you. And instead of immediately stopping that person, it has to be a very gradual, because you see, habits don't go immediately. They take time. And one of the challenges for you is to remain patient. So I think one of the biggest challenges that we face in correcting people is that element of patience, which at times eludes us. We just give up at times too soon. We become angry, or we just think that that person is good for nothing. No, I think you have rightly pointed out that this is a game of patience. The more patient you are, the more the results would be permanent and not temporary. Right, thank you. So, Samin, you have something to say?
I think it's important to come from a compassionate and understanding background, and probably just understand their point of view, like maybe why they've fallen into this bad habit. Because sometimes it's like, they just need someone to talk to, and they have like a coping mechanism, which might be a bad habit. So just talking to them and just understanding where they're coming from, instead of just accusing them of doing something wrong.
Absolutely, absolutely correct. So, well, what you're saying is the same as that we should have empathy, and we should try to imagine that the other person is doing something out of compulsion. It's something that he or she is doing since a long period of time, and you would like to understand that where that person is coming from. You see, at times people get into bad habits because of various reasons, and instead of just accusing the person that you should stop that bad habit, a good way out is that you analyze the reason. So there are a number of reasons that you can see. At times there are the children who get into bad habits. One of the reasons that I have seen is that they come from broken homes, or if the home is not broken, so to speak, then you find that one of the parents is very, very harsh to them, or he or she is someone that who would not be easily accessible or have free communication with the parents, and this is something which makes that person withdraw from the parents, and then he or she seeks refuge in things that make him peaceful or her peaceful. So I have seen people smoking hashish or cannabis or even cigarettes simply because they find that that there is something in their life which is missing, and instead of that positive attitude which they could have got from their parents maybe or their senior elders, they have always faced a harsh treatment, and this has actually pushed them away. So this is one of the reasons. But I think the point that you have made is beautiful, and it's very, very important that see what is happening to that person. Why is it that he has gotten into such a bad habit? So there's, of course, there is this thrill element as well, that adventure element. At times people get into bad habits not because of a very specific reason, but merely because they think that it's an adventurous thing, it's a thrilling experience. But I can tell you that you can easily point those people out, and you can easily even let them know how badly this will affect their lives. But a more difficult proposition is to face youngsters or maybe your siblings who have been driven to this bad habit because of some happening either in the family or even at the school. At times you are bullied in the school, at times you are treated badly by your friends in the school, even your teachers, and that again is a reason that the boy or the girl, he or she withdraws into a corner, and when he or she finds no support from friends as well, then again this is a place of refuge that they fall into a bad habit. So I think that the important point that you have made, Samin, is that the reason of falling into a bad habit, if a person who is correcting that is somehow known, then you'll be in a better position. And I think this will give you this patience also. Another thing it might give you is that motivation. It will motivate you. That person has certain shortcomings, but then he cannot help it or she cannot help it, and there is a background to them, and I need to address that background. So thank you very much for this very important point. Okay, it's Amira. Amira, you have something to say?
Think that you can try telling people, like making them consciously aware of what they're doing wrong and the effect that they're putting on other people. So sometimes when people are doing a wrong habit or something, they don't really realize that they're doing something really wrong, and it's also affecting other people around them. If you make them realize what they're doing and how it's affecting all of the people around them, it could help them in stopping the bad habit.
Right. So Amira, that's another point. That's another very significant point, that at times the bad habit is not just confined to that person. So it is affecting the atmosphere, the environment, the people around that person. So if that person is made aware of the fact that, well, the wrong that you're doing, of course, that's affecting your own life in a bad way. But don't forget that that is being passed on to other people. The people who are living around you, they are being affected. And if not for your own self, at least think for others. So this is also a deterrent, of course. But as I said, that this could be one of the causes for that person to stop if he realizes that something is being done, and that's not just affecting himself but other people as well. But at the same time, our concern is even more. I mean, one of the concerns is that other people are not affected, and another concern is that he himself or she himself is also not affected badly, and he or she comes out of that. And I think for that, some of your other classmates here have given very good suggestions. Okay, Rayan Wahidi, do you have anything to say?
I feel like if it's like a family member, then it's always good to always like number one, not to judge, and then number two, to in a sense make them feel as though they're not alone, because I feel like loneliness can slowly lead you down like an unwanted path. So just ensuring that you give them company and like that reassurance that you are there for them, so that might help.
That's another point. That's another very important point, that you give them this company, that you give them this assurance, and then you don't make them realize that they are the only ones who are doing wrong. But because remember that each one of us has a share of bad habits. So you see, and you see another person doing something wrong, as someone just also said, don't think that you are superior to them, because remember that we ourselves also have certain bad habits. It's not just correction regarding someone else's bad habits. And this brings me to another very important point, which might also be significant in our discussion, that you see correction or challenges to correction. One of the biggest challenges is that start off with your own self. You see, what we are doing is we are correcting other people all the time. We are always looking at the faults of other people. We are always finding those faults, and they are very easy to spot because we are being trained. I mean, it's a natural instinct that we try to find faults in other people. But a better way out and a more productive way out is that at the same time concentrate on our own selves as well. So when you're correcting other people, don't forget your own self, because perhaps yourself or you yourself needs this passion, this emotion, this sentiment that you need to correct other people the most for your own self, because one thing is that you'll be held answerable before God for your own deeds. So I think that a good way to start correcting other people is never to forget our own selves. This process of self-correction, or what I can say is this process of self-accountability, that this is the starting point of all corrections, that you correct yourself first, you make a list of your bad habits and then start working on them one by one. And also remember that when you are correcting the other person, you are not on a superior pedestal, because if that person has one bad habit, you might be having another bad habit. So all of us are at par. We are all equal, and this should not be a cause of thinking that, well, that person is a rubbish, or he's just a lousy person. No, every single person of God that God has created, they have good habits and they have bad habits. We ourselves have good habits, we have bad habits. The only thing is that we have to encourage people for their good habits, and we should try to correct our bad habits and of course the bad habits of those around us. So thank you very much for this small discussion. Let me see the other question that we now have, the third one. Yes. So this third question relates to the contingent requirement of faith that we just discussed. Remember, one of the contingent requirements of faith is that all of us are required to do something for the cause of religion that we follow. Something. So I'd like some of you to think and come up with an answer, that what do you think in your own capacity that you can do to help the cause of religion? It could be several things, but what could be something that you can personally do so that you can maybe help other people in any way? Of course, helping religion is the first thing, but then that would be instrumental in helping other people coming closer to their religion as well. So let me ask Fatma Hussain, what do you think that the cause can be done for the cause of religion? Well, especially in the country and the society that you're living in, what do you think are the needs of religion that can be done in order to further the cause of religion? As I said, this can vary from society to society, place to place, country to country, because each country and each society has its own dynamics. So I'd like to have an answer from you vis-a-vis your own country and society.
I think, regarding where I live, that
let us know, where do you live?
I live in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, you live in Saudi Arabia. Okay.
So where I live, I think there are a lot of misconceptions about religion. So like we could sit together, discuss, and like how people like with those misconceptions and myths they have. So to correct them and sort of, yeah.
Right. So that's a very, very important area that you've touched upon. that one of the things that, especially as you said, you live in Saudi Arabia, and in spite of the fact that it's a very dominant Muslim country, but then there are still things in the minds of people which are not very religious in nature, and they are in fact opposing to nature. So Fatima, can you give an example, or what do you think is the biggest misconception in Saudi Arabia where you're living, that you think that has to be removed from the minds of people? Sine, it's your turn.
I think maybe one of the ways, besides discussion, that you could amend these misconceptions is to be, like Fatima discussed, is to be an embodiment of good character. So if people see that you're a very good person at whatever you do within your own field, if you're a doctor and you're very successful and you've done many good things, and you also have good character and good morals, and the way you project yourself is very successful, and that you're also a Muslim, it can help clear some misconceptions.
So remember, Senior, that there's a small distinction, that what you've just said is actually a permanent requirement of faith. That's what we discussed earlier on as righteous deeds. So in the cause of Nusrat, or helping cause of religion, we are discussing something beyond that. To be a good person, to be a person of good character is a permanent requirement, which is of course something that we discussed before that. The thing that we're discussing now relates to the society that you live in. For example, if you live in Singapore, what do you think in Singapore is the most needed thing to be done for religion?
Off the top of my head, maybe just more tolerance between other religions.
Okay, so you think that no, you see, this is again the issue of attitude comes here. You have to be tolerant. So what we are saying is that as a person, so Sine is a person living in Singapore, and she thinks that there are certain things that can be done to help the cause of religion personally by yourself. So what would be an example of that particular thing?
The cause of religion, I'm confused about the question.
You see, you imagine yourself living in Singapore. I mean, you're living in Singapore, of course, and you see the situation of Islam and Muslims living in Singapore, and you say, oh, well, people need to be educated, so I can contribute, for example, in a charity that's educating people, or I can go and teach there myself. Or if you think, well, there is little support for Muslims as minorities, for example, people who convert to Muslims, they don't have any support, they don't have any help. So you might think that, well, centers which are able to rehabilitate or take care of converts. Similarly, you can think that, well, there is an Islamic center, and that Islamic center needs children who could be perhaps brought there, and the Qur'an could be taught to them. So see, it's environment specific. It's like first thinking that you live, and the very reason that I've brought this discussion into, I mean today I brought it up, is that all of you must think once again more deeply. That think that wherever you're living, whichever country that you're living, you must analyze the dynamics of that country vis-a-vis religion and Muslims, and see what you can do. Because remember that it's a part of our faith. It's a part of our I mean, our faith would be incomplete if we are not doing something for the cause of religion. So if it's not something which might be, I mean, something that you need to think about, do think about, all of you, that just as doing namaz or fasting or telling the truth is a requirement of religion, similarly the Quran tells us that helping the cause of religion is a requirement that all of us need to do. So teaching religion, instructing religion, making people aware of these misconceptions, and playing a role in them, all that would constitute. But remember, this is not something which is abstract or which the government has to do. It's a requirement that each of us as individuals need to do. So whether you're living in Australia or in Singapore or in Saudi or in Pakistan or any country, all that you need to do is look around yourselves and see. For example, if I tell you this, that for example in Pakistan, I don't need any further mosques. To build a mosque could be another help of religion, but there are so many countries in which there are so many mosques that if you start building more mosques, that would be a fruitless exercise, because there are plenty of mosques. But in areas, for example, in which there is a mosque under construction, and there could be an area in a country where you need funds for the construction of that mosque, and you can do some fundraising for that mosque, for example, that could be a cause of religion that you are helping. But as I said, it has to belong to the area of your expertise also, and to the place that you're living. And this is something that I would now ask each one of you to think deeply, more deeply, and see that it would be an essential part, because today religion needs our help wherever we are, in whatever form we are, whatever our environment is. And this requires some deep thinking, that what can I do to serve the cause of the religion, even if it's a tiny bit, even if it's a very small bit, but you have to play a role, each one of you. Okay, it's Fatima and Ariba. Yes, please go ahead.
So basically, you can generally be kind and represent Islam in pride and happiness where you live, and spread knowledge of God and the religion to friends and family that is accurate, and read Quran to gain more accurate knowledge of Islam.
Absolutely. So this is another area that we, all of us, might be reflecting on more, that to understand religion deeply and then be able to communicate those basics of religion even to our closest of friends or our brothers and sisters, because you see, the awareness of religion is something which is not found at the optimum level. We are always lacking. So if you go deep down and study religion, not only to educate your own selves, but to educate maybe a friend, maybe a sibling, maybe someone near you, that would again be constituting this particular exercise that we had just discussed, that you are helping the cause of religion. So again, thank you very much for that, Ariba. It was wonderful to hear this from you. Okay, so let's move on to the last question of today, and that is, okay, what's that? Yeah, this is a scenario that I'd like to, you must have read it already. So just to repeat it, a father is guilty of getting his son admitted in a very high standard school through illegal means. The son gets to know of this. If he refuses to go to school, his father will be very angry, and if he accepts the admission, a deserving candidate would be deprived of admission. So what would you do if you were in the son's place or the daughter's place, either of you? I mean, if you were in the place that your father, unfortunately, or I mean, just an example, is just a hypothetical situation, that if you were in the position of that person, what would you do? Because if you don't go there, your father would be angry, and if you go there, then your father would be happy, but you would be depriving a person who was actually more deserving of that position than you yourself. So this is like a difficult situation, and I'd like you to comment that how would you come to grips with this situation. So who'd like to go first? Go ahead, Zoya.
My opinion on that is that I would refuse admission to the school. I'm actually currently at like a stage in my life where I'm waiting for college admissions to get back to me. And so knowing how much effort it takes to like put in the work to try to get admitted and going through all of school just to try really hard and like maybe not get accepted, it's really frustrating. So taking someone else's place doesn't seem right at all. And also with parents, my parents, of course, being their child, they've been upset with me before, right? I know how to deal with that. Okay. But I don't really know how to deal with doing something that is inherently wrong and just needing to live with that quietly.
Right.
But there's no way to brag about getting into a school if, you didn't get it on your own merit.
Right. So you would prefer not to go to a school and make your father angry?
Yes.
Okay. That's fair enough. Okay. Anyone else? Ahmed, Mushtaba, what you do? I mean, it's a situation that any one of us can face. You've got two options, and as you just saw, that one of the options. Yes, Ahmed, please go ahead.
I would actually refuse because in Karachi or like generally in Pakistan, there's this environment of bribery and stuff, and like people usually judge others, and it's kind of a negative impact nonetheless if people get to know. I'd rather face my father's anger than take someone take someone's position.
Right. Okay. What about Zirak? What would you do?
I think I would get admitted into the school, maybe, because again, it might be very hard to get into a very high standard school. So if you're taking a place of a deserving candidate that you don't know, think wouldn't really matter to you. But then again, it's also wrong since you're taking his place.
Okay. So what you're saying is that you do think that it is a wrong thing, but you would still do it because getting into a very high standard school is something very difficult, and if even if you get into it through illegal means, although it is wrong, you would not your conscience would not be satisfied, but perhaps you would still go ahead and go to school.
Yes.
Okay, that is fine. Okay, Dania.
For me, I probably wouldn't take this spot because it's morally not right. But
Okay.
then again, I feel when you're in a position yourself, you always have second thoughts also. But I've never really been in this position.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I
Yes,
wouldn't.
obviously, none of us perhaps has been in this position because this is a one of a kind thing. And the reason that I have given you this hypothetical situation is that you see, there could be certain other analogous positions or situations you might find yourself in later in your lives, in which you have to decide between what right is and decide what, in contrast, to please someone who is a very close relative. So even if this is a hypothetical situation, and I think none of us has been in this situation, but remember, this exercise is meant to train you that a similar situation it can arise later in your life, and if you have to have your priorities right, you'll be able uh, to to perhaps adopt the right attitude. Okay, I think that does clear the issue or the point that I wanted you to make. That you see, these scenarios or these situations are situations that we might face in life, and we must be prepared for them. And instinctively, I think one of the things that we have to realize is that however much a person must please his parents, I think righteousness and the truth and justice is something that we just found in the Quran. It holds a much higher status, and the Quran has told us that you have to adhere to justice even if it displeases your own self. I mean, if it is against your interest, even if it displeases your parents or your kinsfolk. So the verdict of the Quran is absolutely clear. Now it is our choice whether we do something which is according to that verdict. Of course, that verdict is something which satisfies our own conscience as well. And for example, if there are situations in which we adopt the other option, then we have to realize this fact that one day we'll have to justify these options before God, and we must have a mighty good reason for that. So thank you very much, my dear friends, for this beautiful discussion that we had today. Inshallah, we'll be back next week with a different topic. Until then, enjoy your holidays, and it is Khuda Hafiz from your teacher.